Hey guys, what's up? We are back with another video today, and today we are doing our ACC preview and predictions. We got 17 teams that we got to rank here, so I'm the football expert, joined here by American Football Network. Lincoln, are we ready to go through your conference?
We're ready to go through the ACC. A lot of teams with the new additions went from 15 to 17 or 14 to 17. Added 3 new teams, so it'll be a fun season. Still, I'll never get used to Cal and Stanford in the ACC ever.
Yeah,
I don't think even SMU's a stretch.
Yeah,
but Cal and Stanford, that's just crazy. But I'll go ahead and start us off at number 17. I have Stanford. Not really a whole lot on this football team. Just average players all over the field. Now they do have Alec Ivermanor at wide receiver, who may end up being one of the top 3 or 4 receivers in the ACC this year. In terms of talent, he's probably not going to have the numbers that some of those guys have just because of the team he's on. Ashton Daniels at quarterback isn't terrible. He's a solid quarterback, at least for Stanford. This is a team that is really in a rebuild. Troy Taylor, a good head coach. I think you give him enough time, and I think he'll get that time at Stanford. I think he could build them into something pretty decent. At least a consistent bowl team, especially in the ACC. It'll be easier to recruit, more money coming in. And so I think that this could be a solid team, but defensively, just not a whole lot, and offensively, not much either outside of Ivermanor.
Yeah. Number 17, I got the Virginia Cavaliers. Your old OC being their head coach. Never liked the hire. Don't like Virginia. Yeah, they're a bad team. This is a Virginia team that's going to struggle. And I just don't see it turning around here. So I think that they're in a little bit of a rut. So 17, Virginia.
For sure. I'll get to Virginia in a bit. I have Wake Forest coming in at 16. I think that Clawson and this team are in a pretty bad spot. Hank Bachmeier, quarterback, a guy who's had some experience at the Power 5 level. He's a decent quarterback, but the defense is still a mess for Wake Forest. It's never really been good these last few years. Really, that's what's kept them from being competitive in the ACC for an ACC championship. That they did make it that one year and lost to Pitt. Yeah. But that defense is just – they've always been really good at getting takeaways, but they've never been able to just tackle and fill their roles. And so I'm not big on this Wake Forest team. I don't see many weapons for them offensively. Defensively, like I said, a mess. I think it's going to be a tough time for Wake Forest. Just don't see a lot that I like there for them. So who do you have coming in at 16?
Number 16, I got Stanford. I'm not a big fan of Stanford, but I do like Troy Taylor, and I do like the 2 players that you pointed out with the quarterback-wide receiver pairing. I think that they're in a good spot there. Defensively, they have some pieces. They're in a little bit of a struggle, though. But I do believe they still have whatchamacallit at running back. Let me double check. No, they do not. Or yeah, they do. Cedric Irving, whatchamacallit's son. Michael Irving. Yeah. They still do have his son. So he's a good running back. But overall, Stanford, they're going to struggle. They're going to have to go cross country all the time. So their road games against a team like Wake Forest, it's going to be a lot more of a struggle. So that's definitely going to be there. But I do have a 16 for the Cardinals.
Yeah, so when I look at number 15, I have Virginia. Tony Elliott, not a great hire, hasn't had a whole lot of success, 6-16 in 2 years. I will say with him, Virginia's just been kind of a weird program since he took over. A lot of stuff going on that are out of anybody's control. Within the football program, you have the shooting. And so it's just kind of been a weird vibe around Virginia and Tony Elliott, but a decent season for them last year. They went 3-9. They beat North Carolina on the road and beat Duke. 2 big wins there for them in the ACC. But, they're just a team that you can see improvements throughout the years that he's been there, but it's not translating to record. It's minor improvements. They haven't taken a step forward. This year, I think they could potentially get to 5 wins this year. They have a fairly easy schedule. I mean, you look to start off a win against Richmond.
That's not a guarantee, though, Virginia. That's not a guarantee.
You probably win at Coastal Carolina. You're bigger and stronger and more physical than they are, and they lose a lot.
To be fair, this is the same team that did lose to James Madison last year and beat William and Mary by 14.
Yeah, it is. You probably beat Boston College at home. I think you could beat, a team like Pittsburgh on the road. So there are some winnable games on the schedule for this team for sure. You look at quarterback Anthony Colandrea. He's a solid quarterback. He played pretty well for them last season. They have Malachi Fields on the outside. He's a good receiver. Chris Tyree, they bring him in through the transfer portal. He'll be a good just all-purpose player.
Yeah.
You have Kobe Pace at running back. He's a good running back. Had a good year with Clemson a few years ago, and had a solid year for him last year. Defensively, they returned 8 starters. They were pretty good defensively. They have probably the best free safety in the SEC and the ACC, and Jonas Sanker. He's a really good safety. So they have some pieces on this team. They're not just a bunch of garbage players out there. They have some actual pieces on this team. The biggest thing for me, though, is what does that offensive line look like on the right side? You got to replace both starters. So I think Virginia can win some games, but I do have them coming in at 15. I don't think they win very many.
Yeah, I won't be too long with this one with Wake Forest because you already hit on most of the key points. But Wake Forest, Tank Buckmeyer, I just don't see it at quarterback. I just don't see any improvements there. This is a team that went 4-8 last year with their only in-conference win being against Pittsburgh at home. I don't see it. Maybe a win against Cal. A road game against Connecticut's not a guaranteed win. Old Miss is going to be a loss. Louisiana, you don't know there.
No.
So I could see David Clawson going 2-10. And at that point, he's not going to get fired this year, but next year he's going to be on the hot seat, even with all the success he's had.
And honestly, at this point, he might just retire or just mutually agree to part ways. He'd just be done with the program. 14 for me, I have Boston College. This is a team, don't really have a lot going your way. You lose your head coach as well. Bring in Bill O'Brien. The one thing I do like about Boston College is Thomas Castellanos. He's going to make plays for you.
Yeah.
He just makes all these crazy plays. And I think a good offensive mind like Bill O'Brien could find a way to do some tricky, sneaky stuff with that. Mm-hmm. I think Boston College could have a somewhat solid season. They went 7-6 last year and beat SMU in a bowl game. I could see Boston College having another solid season. Their out of conference is much tougher this season, though.
Yeah.
They do get Duquesne, but then they get at Missouri, Michigan State, and even Western Kentucky isn't going to be an easy team. So I have Boston College coming in at 14, but I could see them in a bowl game potentially this year. You have a lot of winnable games on the schedule, so I could see them making a bowl game this year, but have them coming in at 14.
I have them at 14 as well, but I will be a little bit more down on them. Just listen to some of these games. 3-point win against Holy Cross, 3-point win against Virginia, 3-point win against Army, 7-point win against UConn, 7-point win against Syracuse, 9-point win against SMU. That is every single one of their wins. Like, all of them were close. All of them were within margin of error, I guess is the best way of putting that. Like, they could have lost. They could have won 3 games last year. Like Holy Cross, they almost lost to them, and Holy Cross is pathetic. They're not even a good FCS team. You lost to Northern Illinois in overtime. To be fair, you lost to Northern Illinois by 3. You lost to Florida State by 2. You lost to Pittsburgh by 8. So
that's what I was about to bring up is they pretty much all their games were close, whether they won or lost. In that Florida State game, they should have won that game. If Castellanos got the ball back, he's going straight down the field.
To be fair, though, they had all of their wins were close.
Oh, yeah.
So, that yes, it could have swung maybe in 8 or 9 wins, possibly, but it could have swung very much in the other direction.
For sure.
And have been even worse. So 14, Boston College as well.
At 13, I have Pitt. Don't really like a whole lot of what this team has. I do think Mumfield and Hammond at wide receiver and running back are pretty solid. Nate Yarnell at quarterback, not high on him at all. Defense, you only bring back 2 starters. Pat Narduzzi may be on the hot seat after this year. They went 3-9 last year. Don't expect much better out of them this year. Maybe 4 wins. But I don't know. I just don't think Pitt is going to do very well.
Yeah, well, your non-conference here, I also have Pitt at 13. Your non-conference at Cincinnati, West Virginia, Kent State, and Youngstown State. Youngstown State, you should get a win. Kent State, you should get a win. But at Cincinnati and West Virginia, I just don't see wins there. And then the rest of it, it's not going to be an easy ACC, particularly. You talked about the quarterback situation and everything like that. I just don't like where this Pitt team's at.
I don't either.
I could argue for this Pitt team being even lower than they are, but I do trust Narduzzi to turn it around a little bit more than I trust some of these other coaches like a Troy Taylor or even a David Clawson. Like, they had a worse year. They have a harder schedule, stuff like that.
For sure. I at least expect Narduzzi to have a pretty solid defense despite losing a lot. He tends to have a very good defense with Pitt. At number 12, I have Cal. With this Cal team, not a whole lot on this team. You do have Jaden Ott at running back, and I think the reason I have him at 12 is I think that just strictly based off the running back and Jaden Ott, they're going to be able to win some of these football games. And that's where I have them at 12. But outside of that, they don't really have much on either side of the football. Not really big on Cal this year.
Yeah, and their schedule is a little bit preferable, but they are going cross-country on almost all of their games. At some point, I feel like that's going to have an effect. For a team like North Carolina to go to one game at Cal, that's different than Cal going to all their road games at Wake Forest and Virginia and Clemson and stuff like that. That's going to be much more difficult. Cal, I think they have a better time than Stanford does, but still Cal at 12. So number 11.
Sure. Moving on to number 11, I have Duke coming in here. I think Duke is going to be a pretty solid team this year, although I have them lower in the ACC because I just don't think they have as much success in the ACC. When you look at their out-of-conference games, they get Elon at Northwestern, Connecticut at Middle Tennessee State. They win all four of those. Then it kind of gets tricky. You got like North Carolina at Georgia Tech, Florida State, SMU, at Miami, at NC State, Virginia Tech, at Wake Forest. So it gets a little bit tricky here for Duke. I think Duke could win 8 games this year. I'm just not banking on it with Manny Diaz as head coach, so that's why I have Duke at 11.
Yeah, we agree with this section of spots pretty spot on. I have Duke here as well for the same reasons. I think Malik Murphy at quarterback could be a big bonus with the transfer in from Texas, but outside of that, you do have a lot of question marks, but I think defensively they should be fine between Elko being there previously and now Diaz being there now. I do think that they're in a good spot. So number 10, who you got?
I got North Carolina at 10. They have some players, Kobe Paysauer, Gavin Blackwell, J.J. Jones at receiver, Omarion Hampton at running back. The defense, don't trust it at all. The defense is going to be a mess. That's the reason why they're not going to do very well this year. Offensively, they'll still be pretty solid. Not completely sold on Connor Harrell or this offensive line for them either, who has to replace 4 or 5 starters. But I think that this could still be a solid team for North Carolina. But I don't see them getting out of that 10 spot. I just think they're going to have a tough time in the ACC, although they do have a bit of a favorable schedule when you look at it. But it's just such a Mac Brown thing to do to drop. They lost to Virginia and at Georgia Tech last year, like 2 teams they should have beaten.
Yeah.
And then so, it's just stuff like that they do that you gotta factor in at this point with the past history of it.
Yeah, and when I'm looking at my number 10 team, I got Georgia Tech, and they're kind of the opposite of North Carolina in the sense that they'll beat teams that they shouldn't beat, and then they'll lose to teams that they shouldn't lose to. Bowling Green, an obvious example, versus beating a team like Miami or stuff like that. Obviously, the Miami game had all sorts of things to it. But when you're looking at it, this Georgia Tech team, they're solid. Haynes King is a solid quarterback, but outside of that, I don't see them being anything but middling in this conference. So on to the next team, number 9.
I could see that. Yeah, number 9, I have Louisville. Louisville loses a lot, especially offensively, a lot of those playmakers that they had. Defensively, they'll still be pretty solid. They do bring in Tyler Shue at quarterback from Texas Tech, but he had a rough year last year. They don't really return anything receiver-wise. Just I don't see enough weapons on this team for Louisville offensively to win a lot of football games. Defensively, like I said, they'll be pretty solid. Offensively, I just don't see them being able to really make much happen consistently enough throughout the season.
No, I think that's very fair. So at number 9, I have UNC for pretty much all the same reasons that you have them at the 10 spot. I think that UNC has a bit of a struggle when it comes to being able to stop people defensively. And then offensively, I think they've gotten worse since Sam Howell. Even under Drake May, I think that they were struggling. And they just haven't had the same dynamic playmakers at the wide receiver position that they did under Howell at quarterback. So moving on, number 8 for you, halfway through.
Number 8, I have Georgia Tech. They have some pieces. Haynes King, a good quarterback for them. Jamal Haynes at running back, pretty solid. Offensive line, pretty good. Malik Rutherford at wide receiver, another pretty solid weapon on the outside. But defensively is where I have problems with this team at. And not only that, you look at the schedule as well. So they start out their first 6 games are somewhat easier. They get Florida State and Ireland. I could see them winning that game. They get Georgia State, at Syracuse, VMI, at Louisville, and Duke. But then it really gets tough. You go at North Carolina. They might. You go at North Carolina, Notre Dame at home, at Virginia Tech, Miami at home, NC State at home, at Georgia. They probably lose all of those games. I could see them winning one, maybe against North Carolina or Virginia Tech, but the rest they lose. Miami's not going to let this team win. And so I think it's a team that wins 5-6 games again, maybe 7 if they steal one they're not supposed to and take care of business in the games they should. But this is a pretty tough schedule for Georgia Tech. But I still think it's a pretty solid season for them.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at this team, they are in a good position. Like you said, that Ireland game is going to be a tough one, but it could be a game that they win. It could be a game they lose. I'm not 100% sure whether that favors them or not. At number 8, I got Syracuse. This is a Syracuse team that just simply put is in a really good spot for a team that just fired their head coach. Like it is like crazy that you bring in Fran Brown and you have a better quarterback. You still bring back Gadsden at tight end. You have a solid defense with some good pieces. This is a good Syracuse team that may win 8 or 9 games. But those losses are mostly going to be in the ACC. So I just think that you are going to lose some of those games. But you should bounce back from like a loss against South Florida in the bowl game that it was 45-0, which is just simply unacceptable. But this is an easy schedule for the Orange. And, yeah, so number 7.
For me, at number 7, I have SMU. They bring in one of the top quarterbacks in the ACC, Preston Stone. He's going to be a good quarterback for them, but they don't really have a whole lot defensively, and that's the problem for me with this team is I don't think they have a lot defensively. Also, when you look at the lines of scrimmage, I don't think they're as big and as physical as some of these ACC teams that are ahead of them. I think they need a few more years in the league to really recruit that and build that up. You look at wide receiver, not a whole lot going on there. Romello Brinson and Jake Bailey, solid on the outside. Same with Keyshawn Smith, but not a whole lot. Running back Jalen Knight and LJ Johnson, that will be the strong point of this offense is the running game. So I think SMU will have a solid first season in the ACC. I could see them going like anywhere from 7-5 to 9-3. But once again, like you said with Syracuse, I think those 3 losses, if they have them, are going to come in the ACC for sure. So moving on, no, you still got to give a short number 7.
Yeah. Well, same as you. I have SMU in that spot. So I think SMU, Preston Stone offensively is going to be good. Defensively, I think they have some pieces, but just not a whole unit together. So I think that they will struggle in certain points. And just the transitioning to a new league, you're going to have some losses from that. That's just going to be more difficult. It's proven every year, time and again, that when you transition leagues, it's difficult. You're going to have struggles. So I think that that's what happens. So moving on, number 6, who you got?
Number 6, I got Syracuse. Like you said, Fran Brown comes in, and he may have taken over the best spot of any new head coach that is replacing a fired head coach this offseason. Obviously, DeBoer probably has the best spot coming in, but Saban wasn't fired. So I look at Syracuse, McCord coming in at quarterback. I think he's going to do really good in this system. There's not as much pressure on him that there was at Ohio State. He's got his big tight end, Orlando Gatson. He's the best tight end in the league. And you're going to be able to work the middle of the field, the short game, something that McCord likes to do. Allen at running back, another good player for Syracuse. I think Syracuse goes 9-3 this year, but like I said, I have the 3 losses for them in the ACC. And so that's why I have them a little bit lower down and not towards the top, although a great record.
So number 6 for me, I have the Louisville Cardinals. Louisville replaces a lot, but don't get me wrong. At the same time, they replace a lot. This is a team that just simply put was fantastic last year. They outperformed all expectations under Jeff Brom. And I think that they're in a good position overall, but they do lose a lot. Tyler Shuck at quarterback is going to be probably a downgrade from Plummer, but is it really that much of a downgrade? Plummer wasn't that great, so we'll see. Defensively, I think they're going to be a really good unit. Offensively is where I think they may struggle a little bit. So moving on to the next team as we get into our top 5. At number 5, I got Miami. The Hurricanes, I'm not a super big fan. I like Cam Ward at quarterback, but I'm just struggling to understand if Mario Cristobal is the right head coach. You could get a loss at Florida. You have a home game against Virginia Tech. That could be interesting. A road game against Louisville, Florida State, Duke. I'm not 100% sure on this team, to be completely honest.
Yep, I have at number 5 for me. I have NC State. This is a team they bring in Grayson McCall at quarterback, transfer from Coastal Carolina. He's instantly a top 5, top 6 quarterback in the ACC, if not higher. You look at Jordan Waters, they get him transfer from Duke, good running back. He's going to be electric for NC State. Then when you look, the big guy for him offensively, though, has got to be Casey Concepcion. They can do everything with him. Line him up in the backfield, hit him out on the outside, put him in the slot, wherever they want to throw this guy, they can put him, and he's going to cause problems. Also have Noah Rogers and Dakari Collins out there on the outside, 2 other solid receivers for them. So I expect some good things to come from this team. They lose a lot defensively. I think Doran will put together and make a pretty solid defense, but I think it'll be a good year for NC State. I have them coming in at number 5.
At number 4, I have NC State for many of the same reasons that you do. Have them at 5. I just think that NC State with McCall is just in a better position than Ward and Miami. And I think that I like them a little bit more, and I like NC State's schedule a little bit more than I do Miami. So I am going to have the Wolfpack 1 spot ahead. Who you got it for?
At number 4, I have Miami. I think Cam Ward is the best quarterback in the ACC this year, without a doubt. I think that they have a lot of pieces offensively. I think the reason I have them above NC State is just because I think defensively they're in a bit of a better spot than NC State is. And the biggest question for me with Miami, though, is how do they replace that offensive line? They got to replace the left guard and the center. And really, the offensive line didn't really play that well as a whole for the majority of last season. They had their struggles, ups and downs. Miami, just as a team, with just mistakes. We all remember the Georgia Tech game where they ran the ball, they fumbled, Georgia Tech got it, scored a touchdown when all Miami had to do was kneel it twice.
This
and they
is
win
why
the game.
It shouldn't be in their playbook for NCAA 25.
Yep. So I have my concerns with Miami, but I think talent-wise they're good enough with this schedule to come in 4th in the ACC.
Yeah, I do think that's fair. I'm just kind of concerned with it, Miami. But speaking of concerns, Florida State at number 3. I have them at 3, but it's just because of how they did last year, and I don't know if I trust this team. I don't know if I do. I got them at 3. DJU's a good quarterback, despite what you guys did, which was pathetic with him.
You say what we guys did. Look at his numbers and the way he played at Oregon State. It was the exact same. He's just not a good quarterback, and he'll show you that.
He was used better at Oregon State, simply put, than he was at Clemson. Just simply put.
And he still had the same numbers and the same.
But he did not. But when you're actually looking at the eye test, it wasn't as much of a struggle as it was at Clemson. Just simply put.
Let me ask you this: Have you watched anything from him in the spring at Florida State?
I haven't watched any of him from the spring.
He looks worse than he may have ever been at Clemson.
Maybe that is, but the spring, I'm just not. I don't know if I really trust that. That's different.
It's not different. If you can't hit an out route, then you can't hit an out route.
That
if
is
you throw
fair.
the ball at your receiver's feet every single play, that has nothing to do with it.
I get that, but there are also points in which, like, when I was helping out with my program, which is a D2 program, but at the same time, like when you're watching a quarterback be able to do things, there may be a practice where they really suck in the spring, but then they're fine when you're going in and out the next couple of days or stuff like that. Some people have up and down days. DJ, I think, is pretty firmly where he's at as a player. Like, he's not an elite level quarterback, but can he be a good enough quarterback to get a team to the ACC championship or to the playoffs? Yeah, I do. But do I think they will? No, I just don't think that the pieces around him are good enough. If this was last year, yes, but this year, no. At number 3, I don't need to get too far into it because I think we're in a similar spot with Florida State.
Number 3 for me, I have Virginia Tech. This is a team that they return all 11 starters on offense, including the big-time guy at quarterback, Kyron Jones. This is going to be an electric team. They also return 8 on defense, including the All-ACC defensive end, Antoine Powell-Ryland. He's going to be a star. He's going to be one of the best defensive ends, defensive linemen in the conference. I think Virginia Tech is a team. They're my dark horse pick for the college football playoff. I could see them winning the ACC. Obviously, it's not like the likely outcome, but it's a potential outcome and one that you can realistically say Virginia Tech could win the ACC and end up in the college football playoff, a team I'm very high on. But moving on, who do you have at number 2?
Number 2, I have your Tigers. So when you're looking at this Clemson team, obviously has been disappointing the past couple of years, not where you want to be. But when you're looking at this team into this year, there's not as much hype. So maybe that helps the team a little bit. But your 2 toughest games are on the road at Florida State and at Virginia Tech. And as we both know, those are not easy environments to go into. Those are some of the toughest in the entire country. And Clemson on the road has really struggled with losses at NC State, Miami, and even when it comes to other games, when you go to the year before when it was at Notre Dame, they struggled there. But then when you're at home, there's a lot more of it. It's a much better team. And to be fair, part of that is a great home field advantage that Clemson has. But when you're looking at this, if those games were at home, I'd probably pick Clemson to win the conference. But with those games being on the road, I just can't pick Clemson to win the conference. So I think that they win one of those 2 games that are on the road. I think Florida State's the worst of the 2. So I am going to pick Clemson to finish second in the conference.
For me, I have Florida State coming in at second. I look at this team. They have some solid receivers. They lost so much, and they brought in pieces to replace that, but they definitely didn't replace those pieces on the level of what they lost. You look at DJ. Again, he's not really a good quarterback. He's good enough with this team that he can go win 10, 11 games with them, put them in the ACC championship. But he's, to me, and the biggest thing he talked about it, and this might have just been an excuse that he said, I don't know, but he's talked about pressure before, that he doesn't like the pressure. Well, you're playing at Florida State, a team that went 13-0 last year and got left out of the playoffs. You got pressure on you. You're going to play Clemson at home. You're telling me that game's not going to have any pressure for it? Clemson gave that game away to Florida State last year. They're coming in there looking to take it back. Not only that, you're playing against your former team for the first time, a team that you really crap talked when you got out to Oregon State, even though they did everything to cover you up and keep all the blame off of you. So this is going to be, that'll be the biggest game of the ACC season, is that game right there. Even if Clemson and Florida State both end up to being a little bit more disappointing than what they're expected to finish as, just with the storylines coming out of that game, you're going to have a lot there. So, yeah, I have Florida State coming in at second.
So, first for my ACC, I got Virginia Tech winning it all. I think that when you're looking at this Virginia Tech team, you're looking at a team that brings back all their offensive starters, that brings back a good home environment, that has a super easy schedule. I just don't see a reason why not to. I'm not saying 100% that I really I think that there's no shot that they don't win the conference. But do I think right now picking this, I'm going with the Hokies.
I have Clemson at number 1. When you look at their wide receivers, it's the best they've been in 3 or 4 years. If they stay healthy on the outside, they're going to have one of the best receiving rooms in the conference. You look at Klubnik, he took steps forward last year. I expect another one from him this year. Phil Maffa really just solidified himself as a dominant number 1 back. I expect a 1,000-yard season out of him if he stays healthy this year. Keith Adams, another guy that's back there at the backfield, another electric guy. He's more of the speed guy. The offensive line looks to be a more improved as the season went on, particularly in that stretch of the last 5 games. They really held it down, and I expect them to continue that. The defense, they lose a lot, but they bring back a lot as well. In terms of production, mainly the biggest thing is bringing back Barrett Carter. That was your big thing there. They had a lot of young guys last year as freshmen who got a lot of playing time, and I expect that to really help them when you look at it this season. I think that overall Clemson's going to have a pretty solid season. They will lose to Georgia week 1 as long as Georgia has enough players eligible to play, not behind bars. They will, but I think they go into Florida State and win that game, and I think that they go into Virginia Tech and win that game as well. I think just defensively for Clemson, they're going to be good enough to shut down and slow down for both of those offenses, really. And I think that'll be the difference in the game for those. So that wraps up our ACC predictions for this year. We already have our SEC ones out. We'll leave a card here so you guys can go check those out. We appreciate all of you guys watching. We hope you'll like and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time.